We're here at Orlando Brewing, just south of downtown Orlando. They've been pouring beers since 2006, well before the craft beer craze that has swept the nation. I'm going to have a couple beers today with Channel 9 News anchor Greg Warmoth. So let's go see what's on tap. I'm Christian Bruey, and I'm on a mission to discover the best breweries in Florida. Along the way, I'll sit down with some of the biggest names in sports and enjoy a few drinks while we're at it. So sit back, relax, and grab a pint. This is On Tap. Greg Warmoth has been a news anchor at WFTV Channel 9 in Orlando for more than 30 years. Today we'll share some beers and talk about his friendship with Shaq, his appearance in a Hollywood blockbuster, and raising a first-round draft pick. You like beer?
Do I like beer? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's better than a lot of things that you can drink.
Yes. All right, well, let's start with the La Guera. It's the blonde one here at Orlando Brewing, since you're sitting next to a blonde guy.
Okay, what are we
doing
here?
Try this one. We got 4.7% alcohol content. Nice and easy, right?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's brewed here locally.
All of these beers that we got here, all brewed right here at Orlando Brewing Company.
We're not chugging these, right?
No, we can just sit here and
okay.
Then you come here to cover sports.
Right.
There was no Magic. There was no Orlando City. What were you covering?
My first news conference that I covered was in a place that seemed a little bit like this, small and quaint, really neat, locally owned. And it was Pat Williams saying, we want to bring an NBA team here. And I interviewed this guy. He was with the Philadelphia 76ers, was recruited down here to try to bring a team. That was my very first news conference.
And then it happens. What was that, seeing Orlando essentially become a professional sports team?
I mean, it was supposed to be just two teams.
Yeah.
There were 4 major cities that were involved: Minneapolis, Charlotte, Miami, and Orlando. So we thought 2 out of 4 are going to get it. And so there was this big push. I went to all 4 cities. I did live reports from all 4, talking about the pluses and minuses at all those. And Pat Williams did this season ticket sale, and he just kept pushing, kept pushing. David Stern came to town. He put Mickey Mouse ears on his head when he got off the plane.
I don't think David liked that.
No, I don't think he did, but he remembered it.
Yeah.
And so the NBA wound up saying, we'll give all 4 cities teams. So we got one.
Then a couple years in, Shaq comes. So they win the lottery.
Yep.
You had this relationship, you've told me, because the way that airports worked, you could be the guy that's sitting there waiting for him almost like you're his chauffeur.
There was no TSA, there was no Homeland Security, so I had a travel agent that could figure out the flights he was on, whether he was landing in Orlando, Chicago for the pre-draft camp, San Antonio, Atlanta, and every flight he was on from the time we won the lottery until the draft, I was there waiting for him to get off the plane, because he never said he wanted to play for Orlando. He just wanted to play in the NBA.
Yeah.
The real thinking was he was going to try to orchestrate a trade, or his agent, Leonard Armato. So I was there, so I told our sports director at the time, if this joker signs, you're going to have to find someone else to cover him, because he hates me.
Because you were the guy that was there every single time.
Every single time he came off the plane. When he signed, he stood in front of the press and said,
I'd like to thank the media, especially my main man, Greg. Where are you, Greg?
And I was like, oh, and there was the relationship. And then I just grabbed that relationship and ran with it, much to the chagrin of other reporters. Radio shows used to rip me. The paper ripped me every time they had a chance to do it. But I just kept doing it. I traveled with him to Hollywood, stayed in the mansion with him, across from Bob Hope's house while he filmed that terrific movie, Kazam. But I used to say, when people would criticize me, who else is going to give you this access to this larger than life, figuratively and literally, person who liked me? I rode jet skis with him, rode in cars with him, had his hoopty bouncing down the road. I mean, I did it all with him.
That's, I think, maybe one of my favorite video clips that we've gone back in the archives is Shaq, 7'2", 300 plus pounds, front of the jet ski.
Yeah.
You on the back. They put the helicopter up and he threw you off.
We were at his house and he says, I'm canceling the interview. This is right before he became a free agent. I'm canceling, I'm not doing the interview. I said, man, you're gonna make me look bad, Shaq.
Yeah.
He goes, well, my agent told me no interviews. And I said, come on, let's do a deal. He goes, all right, I'll cut a deal with you. If you can stay on my jet ski and not fall off, I'll talk to you. Shaq throws me off and I get back in. And he says, yeah, I'll talk to you, you're pretty tough. Entertainment Tonight used that video. ESPN used that video. Yeah, it's crazy.
Let's have try another one of these
I'm
beers.
Getting thirsty.
You want to go with the next one down? We got the Homer's Flying Circus Schwartz
now this
beer.
one might be a little dark
darker
for me.
Yeah?
I'm not a big dark beer guy, but we'll try it.
I like this one. They named it after a regular.
It's like coffee.
Coffee, yeah.
Actually, this would be good in the morning.
Well, that's
the
what
Channel
I
9 might frown upon it. But.
Hey, it looks like coffee, so you could discuss it.
If you're a coffee drinker, if you like it tastes good. It's just I don't drink coffee.
Your relationship with Vanessa Echoes, because you guys were on that morning show for so long, and you know everyone woke up to you in Central Florida. How big is the relationship between two anchors?
We had great success. As a morning team, we were the #1 rated morning team in the country, and I give her all the credit because I was just sitting there. I was just basically giving her a chance to breathe, and I read a few scripts, then she would go. But she went through her battle with breast cancer, and that
forged that relationship?
I think it did quite a bit because I watched her. She never called in sick. She came in all the way through every treatment unless she had just had a surgery or something when she couldn't. But, like I said, to know her is kind of like you're a Gator. I feel like knowing her is kind of like knowing Tim Tebow. I feel like you're better for it. No matter how you feel about Tim Tebow as an athlete or whatever, the guy just makes you better, and that's what I would say about Vanessa.
So let's go to the next one. We got the Maybach Pale Lager.
Yep. Maybach like the car?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like an Oktoberfest. John told me that earlier. He said this is a perfect kind of Oktoberfest style beer for Florida.
This is my favorite one of the ones we've had so far.
So I got to ask you about Armageddon.
Our
He appeared in Armageddon.
Yeah, our promotion said, hey, there's an audition. If anyone wants to try out for it, they're looking for an actual news reporter. It was the last day of shooting for Armageddon. I thought, yeah, I'll go out there and try it. And there was a lady, she had a cigarette in her mouth. And there was a huge line outside, and they give you the lines that you have to read. And she's got the cigarette. All right, read it. I haven't memorized it. It's single space. There's a little VHS camera. I'm like, and I'm doing it. And then
Do you remember the lot?
No, it was a long script.
Oh, it was long.
So I read it, and I get home and tell my wife, man, that was brutal. I hope they don't, they burn that tape.
Yeah.
So I'm in bed. Home phone rings. It's after midnight. It's Michael Bay, the director of Armageddon, and who did, all these great movies. The guy's a huge director. And he said, what are you doing tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock? I said, I don't know, tell me. And so I showed up, special security. I go in. There's a trailer. It's got my name on it. I go in, sit there. There's college football playing. There's food. You can have food. Billy Bob Thornton's right next to me. Bruce Willis. All these people are all through there. So I'm eating. I'm having a big time. Knock on the trailer comes right about dusk. The guy goes, have you memorized your lines? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, right here. And there was this little 3x5 card with what I was supposed to say. I had no idea. So I'm on the golf cart riding out to the launch pad. I'm looking at it. And I get out there, and then there's the camera. It's on a train track thing about this far from my face. And Michael Bay on the chair, and he goes, okay, here's what I want you to say. And I did like 20 or 30 takes. I was proud because I didn't stumble. Whatever he said, I repeated it. I was like a parrot. And he goes, is there anything you want to add to the scene? I go, well, I have this card with the script. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And so I read that.
Was that what ended up in the movie, or was the other
side? The card actually wound up in the movie. And it was only, I don't know, 12 seconds, but they showed me for 3 or 4. I don't remember how long it was.
Senior Pentagon officials refused comment, adding fuel to the speculation that there could be a very serious problem.
The biggest mistake I made, the lesson that I have for my kids out of that, is that when somebody asks you to sign something, don't. So I finished my scene. Aerosmith is there that night at the launch pad, and they play a rap party. So there's Aerosmith, Steven Tyler, they're singing, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. But I finish, and the guy says, hey, if you sign here, and it was like, we'll send you a check for $2,000. Or if you sign here, you'll get residuals, only if you're in the movie, because you could be cut.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'll take $2,000, I got little kids. Took the $2,000, it comes 2 weeks later. One of the girls who also was shooting a scene that day got $250 for a month for like 12 years. And I was in the movie with my face on the movie. So the lesson there is I probably should have rolled the dice, but I needed the $2,000.
Coming up, we go behind the scenes at Orlando Brewing to find out what it takes to be a certified organic brewery. And later, Greg reveals how you too can successfully raise a first-round baseball draft pick. All that and more when On Tap returns. Welcome back to On Tap. Today I'm sharing a few drinks with Channel 9 anchor Greg Warmoth. But first, I was lucky enough to get a private tour of Orlando Brewing with President John Cheek and found out what exactly makes their beers so unique. You guys are all organic.
Yes, we are.
You guys were kind of the first on board with that. And was that just something that, a rule that you wanted to stick by?
One of the things that we really looked at is we wanted to make the best beer we possibly could. These are the best ingredients that we can get and make beer out of. Yep. There's no pesticides, no GMO, no genetic engineering, none of that stuff. So we don't really have to worry about what we're putting in our bodies. The best thing about our beer is the water. It's just a pristine, comes from the deep Florida aquifer. So the purity of it is the best.
So this is the second step, I guess, for the I4 IPA, which I think is one of the great names. You know, it localizes it.
It's easier to drink it than it is to drive it.
There's no doubt about that.
We actually are looking at doing the I4 Ultimate and making it a high alcohol beer.
That's in the works?
Stay tuned for that.
The naming, how does that go about? You're just sitting around having some?
The I4, we love the name and we couldn't match it up with the right IPA. So we finally figured out, okay, this needs to be this, and we just rotated all the names.
And I saw the IBU on that is a little lower than maybe some of your hoppier beers.
Yeah.
So that goes into the easier than I4?
Well, I4 really is a IPA that was meant to drink in Florida. We have very hot weather here most of the time. Even in the winter, it gets pretty warm. And it's just an easy drinking beer. It was made for the Florida climate. All three of these tanks are being crashed as we speak, which basically means we're trying to get them as cold as we can to basically put the yeast into a hibernative state of sleep.
So how cold are we talking?
35 is what we try.
So just right above freezing.
But the fact that they're crashing, once they've crashed, then the next step is to eliminate the yeast. We then send it through the centrifuge, which basically spins out the yeast. And then we put it in one of the bright tanks. Then we filter it, sterile filter it, and then it's ready for packaging. This is basically where beer waits. You know, it's they call Florida God's waiting room.
Yeah.
Well, this is the waiting room for the beer. This we have the Pompous Ass. IPA.
Is that you on the...
Well, it looks like me.
What do you think of what's become of beer? I mean, it's the craft beer crazes.
One of the things that I always told people was that there should be a brewery in every single town. Mm-hmm. And we were just at the Florida Brewers Guild conference, and there was a brewery, Azalea Brewing, from Palatka, Florida. Okay, if they got a brewery in Palatka, then my dream is almost 100%.
You're right. I grew up just outside of Palatka in Keystone Heights, a one-stoplight town. So if we can get it there, then your dream will definitely be true.
That's exactly what I'm looking for.
How often do you test? That's the other thing I wanted to ask.
I normally taste different beers all the way through the process. I'll pull some off a fermenter, taste it just to see how much sugar's in it.
Yeah.
And see how much longer we have to go. But it's
so it would
pretty
be really
much
sweet when you try it then? Or?
Oh, absolutely, because the yeast has not eaten the sugars.
Uh-huh. How often do you experiment with, making a new one, or does someone come up with an idea and say, hey, can I try this?
Normally, at least 3 times a year, we come up with an off-the-wall something. I mean, we're making a smoked porter for the Food and Wine down at Disney. We're making a tea beer for the Chinese Pavilion.
Is that what I see here?
That's the tea part.
Okay.
We still got to.
So you're brewing the tea and then.
That's right.
Wow.
And that's actually what this is.
How is it?
But it's great. You want to try it?
Why not?
It's just.
Yeah. So that's the tea part?
That's the tea part.
That's good. And I thought it was a beer the whole time.
Yeah, that's the whole beauty. I always tell people you can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning.
So what are the other ones are there some others that you're working on too, or?
Well, the next seasonals, we have our Spice Stout coming out next weekend. Then we have Oktoberfest coming out in September. In November, we have our Chocolate and Girl Stout, which was the original Violator beer.
Yeah.
When my daughter worked here, she was the brewery operations manager, and Dad, these are all so boring. And I want to make something, with chocolate in it. Oh, no, not going to do that. And then my son came up and said, well, Dad, you could call it the Violator series. And I went, oh, okay, we can do it.
There you go.
You get a cool name.
And now is that an annual? It comes back every year.
Yes, it's in fact this is the seventh year that we've done it.
After the break,
If you take a piece of string and you push a piece of string across the table, what does it do?
what does this analogy have to do with good parenting? Find out when On Tap returns. You're watching On Tap with Christian Bruey. Let's go back inside the tap room of Orlando Brewing as Channel 9 anchor Greg Warmoth tells us what it's like to raise a professional athlete in today's world. Justin first, Tyler second, Logan third. All go play collegiate baseball.
All those kids were good for different reasons. Like Justin had the huge heart and just willed himself to college baseball. Won a state championship, 4 College World Series in a row for Embry-Riddle, NAIA. Tyler walked on at Stetson, pitched all the way up to AAA with the Angels.
Logan is the one that, being the youngest, do you think that had an impact? He drafted in the first round by the Blue Jays.
Right.
How much of that is because he was the youngest and saw the older brothers do it?
Logan coming up because of his brothers probably and his influence and exposure, but his athleticism.
It's there.
Yeah, it was more there. I think if you were to ask any of the friends or coaches that had him coming up, they wouldn't be necessarily surprised by that. Because what is behind, there are very few success stories, and this goes back to sports, that happen by accident. I can promise you that everybody that you cover in sports, there is somebody, whether it's a coach, a mom, a dad, a mentor, that has grabbed them and pulled them along. I use the analogy, if you take a piece of string and you push a piece of string across the table, what does it do? It bunches up. But if you pull the string along, what does it do? It stays in a straight line. So I use that. I never push my kids, but I pulled them.
Let's go. This next beer is really interesting from Orlando Brewing. Entitlement. John Cheek, president, started Orlando Brewing. His son, when he turned 21, said he didn't like IPAs or the stronger beers, so he brewed this one.
So he brewed his own beer?
Brewed his own beer for his 21st birthday.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. So that's the hair of the dog that bit you that you made,
yes,
you know?
Right?
Wow. That's really good.
Yeah. Your news career here in Channel 9 over the last 10 years, it's been really incredible, the number of national news stories from Casey Anthony to Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, to a couple of hurricanes, to the Pulse shooting. What has it been like to be essentially front and center for those?
I think each thing developed me as a broadcaster so that I was ready for Pulse. Pulse was easily the hardest thing I did. Casey was a circus. George Zimmerman was a circus, and then all of a sudden Pulse happens. I was at the Super Regional, Florida State, Florida, when Pulse happened. And it happened in the overnight hours. Luckily, our news department contacted me at 5 in the morning, and I was back and I was on the air by 9. So I was on for that day. But those types of stories, those Pulse things, unlike hurricanes, unlike fires, those are the hardest. The unknown is so overwhelming to you as a broadcaster that you have to keep your composure and only talk about what you know. So the other things, Well, difficult because of the legality. When I sat on the set that day and that happened, I was like, wow, this is the real deal.
And for the folks at home, I mean, it's all ad-libs. A lot of the times when you're on the newscast, we have the teleprompter and everything. You say the mind's turning.
Because
Were
I
you
heard.
on the air when Mayor Dyer came on and said
Yes,
the number?
I tossed to him. And
And I
his
think that
number
was the one time that
Yeah.
everyone's heart sank.
Well, and he said 50, which was true because
Yes.
you include the gunman.
Yes.
That was mind-blowing. Think about a hurricane or fires or Anthony or Zimmerman. We have crews in place. We're so prepared.
Yes.
There, we can't get into the police line. We're trying to get information. In the meantime, I'm trying to think, where are we going to go next? Is it time to recap the viewers that are just coming in? How do we stay calm? What are we talking about here? And I think I did a good job with that, but I didn't do it by accident. It was through those years. And I think being a sports person has helped me tremendously because all those sporting events end right before you go on the air. You don't know how a sporting event that night is going to play out.
The growth of Orlando in the time, the 32 years that you've been here. What's it been like to see that?
Well, a lot of people say, why'd you stay here so long? Well, a couple of things. You mentioned it earlier. One, I got here, I think we were market 30, now we're market 18. They'd have been even smaller than that at the time. So the city has grown in market size. Then we had the team get announced right on the anniversary of when my contract was due. I was like, well, I got to see this through. Yeah. Then we get Shaq on my next contract. Well, I got to see this through. And then we go to the NBA Finals. I got to see this through. And then I get moved to news. Okay, I got to see this through. Then it wasn't on purpose that I stayed here for 32 years, but I'm thankful I stayed here for 32 years. And now I'm not going anywhere.
That's it for today's episode of On Tap. Thanks to Orlando Brewing and real-life anchorman Greg Warmoth. Follow us on Instagram to see what's on tap.